Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The burrito hit the floor with a wet splat as Martin Jones's entire world twisted inside out. One moment he'd been standing in his apartment, contemplating whether double meat had been worth the extra $3, and the next, "By the sacred stones of Relia, I command you to yield." Martin blinked rapidly, his brain struggling to process the scene before him. He stood in what appeared to be an ancient temple, all soaring stone columns and crystalline light filtering through impossibly high windows. But it wasn't the architecture that caught his attention. It was her. A woman stood before a towering monolith of black stone, her muscles tensed as she gripped an ornate spear embedded deep within the rock. Her skin was a rich violet color that seemed to shimmer in the ethereal light, and she wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor that left little to the imagination while somehow remaining dignified. Her face was a study in determination and growing frustration as she yanked at the weapon. "Ah," Martin managed eloquently, "I think I'm in the wrong place." Dozens of armed guards circled the chamber, their own spears pointed directly at him. They wore similar armor to the woman, though considerably more practical in coverage. Their violet skin ranged in shade from deep amethyst to pale lavender. The woman spun toward him, her golden eyes narrowing. "How dare you interrupt the sacred ceremony of ascension?" Her voice carried the kind of authority that suggested she was used to people jumping when she spoke. "I am Anita Reilly, first warrior of the Reliant people, and you will—" "Look, I literally just wanted lunch," Martin interrupted, holding up his now empty hands. "One second I'm in Seattle about to destroy a burrito, and now I'm—" He glanced around. "Somewhere that's definitely not Seattle. Unless Whole Foods has really changed their interior design." Silence. Anita's hand moved to a metallic device at her hip that looked decidedly more lethal than the ceremonial spear. "You have desecrated our most holy ritual. The punishment for such transgression is—" A low hum filled the chamber, cutting her off. The spear in the stone began to glow with a pale blue light. "Impossible," Anita whispered. She turned back to the spear and renewed her efforts to pull it free, her muscles straining. "I am the chosen one. The prophecy spoke of this day. I alone am worthy to—" "Have you tried wiggling it?" Martin suggested, immediately regretting opening his mouth as every weapon in the room swiveled toward him. Anita's glare could have melted steel. "Perhaps you'd like to try, human?" Her tone dripped with sarcasm. "Since you're clearly an expert in ancient Reliant artifacts?" Martin shrugged. What did he have to lose? He was either having a very vivid hallucination brought on by bad Mexican food, or he was about to die anyway. Sure, why not? He walked forward, somehow managing not to flinch as the guards tensed. Anita stepped aside with an exaggerated bow, her perfect features twisted in a mocking smile. "Be my guest." Martin approached the stone, noting the intricate symbols carved into its surface. The spear itself was beautiful. Its shaft appeared to be made of some kind of crystalline material that pulsed with inner light, while the blade looked sharp enough to split atoms. "Right then," he muttered, "here goes nothing." He wrapped his hand around the shaft of the spear. The world went silent. Energy surged up his arm, not painful but intense, like being filled with liquid starlight. The spear's glow intensified, and without any conscious effort on his part, Martin pulled. The weapon slid free as easily as a knife through warm butter. The silence in the temple shattered. That's impossible," Anita breathed, her golden eyes wide with disbelief. She strode forward, her armored boots clicking against the stone floor. "Give me that." She reached for the spear, but the moment her fingers neared it, blue energy crackled between them like miniature lightning. She yanked her hand back with a curse in what Martin assumed was her native language. "Okay, so that's new. Martin said, examining the spear with growing interest. It felt warm in his hands, almost alive. Does it usually do the whole light show thing, or am I special? One of the older guards stepped forward, his violet skin wrinkled with age. The sacred spear of Relia has chosen. His voice carried the weight of centuries. As it was foretold in the ancient texts, only the true heir can remove the spear from the stone. I'm sorry, what? Martin and Anita spoke in perfect unison, then glared at each other. This is absurd, Anita protested. He's not even Reliant. He's a software developer from Seattle, Martin supplied helpfully. Though I did once win a hot dog eating contest, if that helps my royal credentials. The elder guard, Martin decided to call him Gandalf in his head, raised his hands for silence. The spear does not make mistakes. According to our most sacred laws, the one who draws forth the spear shall lead our people, and take the hand of the first warrior in marriage. Martin's brain took a moment to process that. I'm sorry, marriage, as in, to her. He pointed at Anita, who looked like she was contemplating the most efficient way to dismember him. I will not marry this human. Anita spat the last word like it tasted bad. The law is absolute, Gandalf intoned. To refuse would mean death for both of you. Death? Martin squeaked. He looked at the spear in his hands, then at the furious violet-skinned warrior who apparently was now his fiancée. Can I maybe get a moment to update my Tinder profile first? Anita's hand moved to her weapon again. I vote for death. The ceremony must be completed, Gandalf continued, apparently immune to the tension. The sacred union will bind our peoples together and unlock the full power of the spear. Martin raised his hand like a student in class. Quick question, what exactly is this full power we're talking about? Because if it's anything like what I'm feeling now... He gestured with the spear, accidentally sending a bolt of energy into one of the columns. The crystal surface rippled like water. Everyone ducked. Anita moved faster than seemed possible, closing the distance between them and gripping his wrist. Give me that before you kill someone. The moment her skin touched his, the spear's glow intensified. Warmth spread up Martin's arm, but this time it was different, less like power and more like something else, something that made his heart rate spike and his mouth go dry. Anita felt it too. He could tell by the way her eyes widened, the way her grip on his wrist loosened but didn't let go. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Well, Gandalf said, sounding entirely too pleased, it appears the spear approves of the match. That broke the spell. Anita jerked away like she'd been burned. This is impossible. There must be some mistake. I demand a review of the ancient texts. The texts are clear. Another elder stepped forward, this one female with pale lilac skin. The prophecy speaks of one who comes from beyond the stars, bearing the mark of the ancient ones. I have a birthmark that kind of looks like Pac-Man, Martin offered. Does that count? The female elder ignored him, continuing, only through the union of two worlds can the coming darkness be defeated. Coming darkness? Martin's attempt at humor faded. What coming darkness? But before anyone could answer, the temple's massive doors burst open. A group of armed Reliants stormed in, their weapons definitely not ceremonial. Death to the false heir, one of them shouted. Oh, come on, Martin muttered. I haven't even been engaged for 5 minutes. Anita moved with lightning speed, pushing him behind her and drawing her weapon in one fluid motion. Stand down, she commanded. This is a sacred ceremony. The ceremony is a lie, the leader of the new group declared. No human can be allowed to claim our holiest relic. Martin gripped the spear tighter, feeling its energy pulse in response to his anxiety. Look, guys, I'm happy to give it back. Really, no hard feelings. I've got a burrito waiting for me back home anyway. You can't give it back, Anita hissed over her shoulder. Once claimed, the spear is bound to you until death. You know, you could have mentioned that part earlier. I was a little busy being angry about my life being ruined. The rebels advanced, their weapons humming with deadly energy. The temple guards moved to intercept them, but they were outnumbered. Any chance that full power you mentioned could kick in right about now? Martin asked Gandalf. The elder shook his head. The spear's true power can only be unlocked through the completion of the sacred union. Right. Marriage. Of course. Martin looked at Anita's back, admiring despite himself the way she stood ready to defend him, even though she clearly wanted to kill him herself. Hey, future wife? Any chance we could speed up this wedding thing, for survival reasons? Anita's response was cut off by a blast of energy that struck the floor near them, sending fragments of crystal scattering. Martin instinctively pulled her down, his software developer reflexes surprisingly useful in a crisis. As they crouched behind a pillar, reality finally started catching up with him. His heart hammered in his chest, and not just from the adrenaline. What the hell was happening? An hour ago, his biggest concern had been debugging a particularly nasty piece of code, and now, she actually laughed then, a sound that made his heart do something complicated in his chest. Perhaps you can. Her expression turned serious. But you should know, once we do this, there's no going back. Your life will never be the same. Martin thought about his apartment in Seattle, his predictable job, his lonely evenings. Then he looked at this incredible woman above him, at the adventure she represented, at the way the spear in his hand felt so right despite everything. His mom had always told him he'd know when he met the right person. She probably hadn't meant an alien warrior princess, but hey, life was funny that way. You know what? He grinned up at her. I think I'm okay with that. The chamber's blue light intensified, the spear's energy wrapping around them both. As Anita's face lowered toward his, Martin had one last coherent thought. At least this would make one hell of a story at his next high school reunion. The sacred chamber's light faded just as Martin's lips were about to meet Anita's. A loud bang echoed through the room, followed by the sound of ancient machinery grinding to life. What's happening? Martin asked, still pinned beneath his alien almost wife. Anita rolled off him with practiced grace, her warrior instincts taking over. The chamber is activating its defense protocols. We need to complete the initial binding now. About that. Martin sat up, gripping the spear that still hummed with energy. What exactly does this initial binding involve? Because on Earth, we usually start with dinner and silence. Anita pressed her hand against a crystalline panel on the wall. Symbols began to glow beneath her touch. The binding requires 3 elements: blood, breath, and battle. I'm sorry, Blood. Martin's voice cracked slightly. Maybe we should take some time to get to know each other first. I don't even know your favorite color, though I'm guessing purple. Anita shot him a look that could have frozen lava. This isn't a joke, Martin. The rebels will break through soon, and if we're not bound when they do. She drew a small ceremonial dagger from her belt. Whoa! Whoa! Martin scrambled backward. I know marriage can be scary, but let's not get stabby about it. The blood is symbolic, she explained with exaggerated patience. A small cut on the palm, nothing more. Unless you'd prefer I aim somewhere else. Martin held out his hand, trying to keep it from shaking. Palm's good. Palm's great. I'm a big fan of palms. Anita took his hand in hers, and again that now familiar warmth spread through him. The spear pulsed in response, its light synchronizing with his heartbeat. She held his gaze as she drew the dagger across his palm, a quick, precise cut that stung but wasn't deep. Blood freely given, she intoned, then cut her own palm in the same way. She pressed their bleeding hands together and the spear's light intensified. Blood freely shared. Martin gasped as energy surged between them. He could feel her heartbeat now, distinct from his own but somehow harmonizing with it. That's intense. Next is breath, Anita said, her voice slightly husky. She moved closer, still holding his hand. We must share one breath between us. Like CPR? Because I took a class once, but I'm not sure. She silenced him by pressing her forehead against his. Stop talking. Their faces were inches apart now. Martin could see flecks of silver in her golden eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath on his lips. The spear's energy wrapped around them like a cocoon of light. Breathe in, she whispered. He did. She breathed out as he breathed in, and suddenly he was filled with her breath, her essence. The world spun, colors intensified, and he could feel her presence in his mind. Not thoughts exactly, but emotions, impressions, determination, duty. And underneath it all, a reluctant fascination with him that matched his growing attraction to her. The moment broke as another explosion rocked the chamber. Anita pulled back, her eyes wide. The final element is battle. We must fight as one. About that. Martin glanced at the weapon she'd given him earlier. I wasn't kidding about the whole no combat experience thing. Unless you count that time I won a heated debate about Python versus JavaScript. Then I will teach you. Anita stood, pulling him up with her. Quickly. First lesson. Anita positioned herself behind Martin, adjusting his grip on the spear. Her body pressed against his back, sending another wave of that strange warmth through him. The spear is not just a weapon, it's an extension of yourself. Right now it feels more like an extension of a really bad decision, Martin muttered, but he tried to focus. The spear's energy pulsed through him stronger now after the blood and breath binding. Clear your mind, Anita commanded. Feel the energy flow. You know, that would be easier if you weren't so... Martin struggled to find the right word as her hand slid down his arms, adjusting his stance. So what? Her breath tickled his ear. Distracting. She stepped back abruptly and Martin immediately missed her warmth. Focus. The rebels will break through any moment. Show me a defensive stance. Martin attempted to mimic the way he'd seen her stand earlier. The spear felt awkward in his hands until... something clicked. It was like writing code, he realized suddenly. When you're in the zone, the keyboard becomes an extension of your thoughts. The commands flow naturally, each line building on the last. The spear wasn't so different, it was just a different kind of interface. He shifted his weight and the spear moved with him, its energy harmonizing with his movements. For a brief moment he felt graceful. Better, Anita said, surprise evident in her voice. Now, attack me. What? No, I don't want to. She moved like lightning, her staff sweeping toward his head. Martin reacted on pure instinct, the spear coming up to block. The weapons met with a crack of energy that sent sparks flying. Not bad, Anita smirked. But can you do it again? She launched into a series of attacks, each one faster than the last. Martin found himself responding with increasing confidence. The spear seemed to anticipate his needs, guiding his movements. He was still clumsy compared to Anita's fluid grace, but he wasn't completely hopeless. You're learning quickly, she admitted after several minutes, barely winded while he gasped for breath. The spear is helping you, but there's natural talent there too. Natural talent for getting my ass kicked, maybe. But Martin stood straighter, pride warming his chest. For the first time since arriving in this crazy situation, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely out of his depth. The chamber shook again, more violently this time. Dust fell from the ancient ceiling. They're almost through, Anita said. We need to complete the final binding now. The battle part? Because I'm not sure 5 minutes of training qualifies me for... No. She stepped closer, her golden eyes intense. The kiss. Martin's heart stuttered. I thought that was just a joke earlier. The sacred kiss binds our spirits together, allowing us to fight as one. She placed her hand on his chest over his racing heart. Do you feel it? The connection is already forming. He did feel it. The warmth had become a steady pulse between them, their heartbeats synchronizing through the spear's energy. When he looked at her now, he could sense echoes of her emotions, determination, worry, and something else, something that made his breath catch. So, he managed, his voice rough. No pressure or anything, but our first kiss might determine the fate of the galaxy. And you said this wasn't like a proper date. Anita's lips curved slightly. Before he could respond, the chamber's door exploded inward. Rebels poured through the opening, weapons raised. Death to the false heir, their leader shouted. Martin spun to face them, the spear moving naturally now. Anita pressed against his back, her weapon ready. They stood together, surrounded but unafraid. Ready for your final lesson? She asked. Let me guess. Don't die. No. He could hear the smile in her voice. Trust your instincts. Trust me. The rebels attacked. Martin and Anita moved as one, their newly formed bond guiding their movements. Where she was grace and skill, he was unpredictability and innovation. He used the spear in ways she'd never considered, treating it like a piece of code to be hacked, finding unexpected solutions. When a rebel tried to flank them, Martin spun the spear in a way that shouldn't have worked, its energy forming a shield. When another got too close, he used a move that was half martial arts, half bad action movie, and somehow it worked perfectly. That's impossible, one of the rebels shouted as Martin deflected an energy blast back at them. Impossible is my specialty, Martin grinned, feeling more alive than he ever had. You should see what I can do with a semicolon. As they fought, Martin felt something changing within him. Each movement became more fluid, each decision more confident. The spear's energy flowed through him like electricity through a circuit, enhancing his natural abilities rather than replacing them. Your left, Anita called out, and Martin moved without thinking, blocking a strike that would have taken his head off. Their coordination was perfect, as if they'd trained together for years instead of minutes. You know, he managed between blocks, if this is your idea of couples counseling, I think we're making progress. Anita launched over his shoulder, taking down two rebels with a spinning kick. Less talking, more fighting, but he could feel her amusement through their growing bond, along with a grudging respect. She'd expected him to be useless in combat, but his unconventional approach was proving surprisingly effective. A rebel rushed them with some kind of energy blade. Martin analyzed the attack like he would a bug in his code, looking for patterns, finding the weak points. The spear responded to his thoughts, moving in ways that made Anita's eyes widen. That's not a traditional combat form, she said as the rebel went down. Yeah, well, I'm not a traditional kind of guy. Martin spun to face the next attacker. Speaking of tradition, when do we get to this kiss thing? Because the timing seems pretty important. Another explosion rocked the chamber. Through the smoke, Martin saw something that made his blood run cold. The rebel leader was holding some kind of device, and it was counting down. Anita! He pointed with the spear. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. She cursed in her native language. Fusion detonator. If it goes off in here, it'll collapse the entire temple. Can we disarm it? Not in time. She met his eyes. But we might be able to contain it. If we complete the binding now, the spear's full power could create a shield. Martin's heart pounded. So we're talking about our first kiss being while fighting rebels and trying to contain a nuclear explosion. Having second thoughts? There was a challenge in her golden eyes. Are you kidding? He grinned. This is way better than coffee shop." They moved together as if choreographed, the spear's energy wrapping around them both. The remaining rebels charged, but they might as well have been moving in slow motion. Martin felt everything with crystal clarity. The weight of the spear in his hands, Anita's presence at his side, the way their hearts beat in perfect synchronization. He wasn't just some lost programmer anymore. He was something more, something that had always been inside him, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "Now!" Anita shouted as the detonator's countdown reached its final seconds. They turned to each other. Time seemed to slow. Martin saw every detail of her face, the determination in her eyes, the slight tremble of her lips, the way her violet skin seemed to glow with inner light. Their lips met. The spear erupted with power, pure energy cascading around them in waves of blue light. Martin felt Anita's consciousness merge with his own, their strengths combining, weaknesses compensating. He saw flashes of her life, her training, her fears and hopes, just as she saw his. The detonator exploded. Martin and Anita moved as one, the spear responding to their united will. A dome of energy expanded from them, containing the explosion's fury. The rebels were thrown back, their weapons useless against the raw power flowing through the bonded pair. When the dust settled, Martin and Anita stood in the center of the chamber, still kissing. The rebels lay unconscious around them. The detonator's remains nothing but ash. They finally broke apart, both breathing heavily. The spear hummed between them, its power settled into a steady pulse that matched their joined heartbeats. "So," Martin managed after a moment, "on a scale of 1 to 10, how was that for a first kiss?" Anita touched her lips, looking somewhat dazed. "That was acceptable." "Acceptable? I just helped contain a nuclear explosion. That's at least an 8. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her entire face. Perhaps an 8.5, with room for improvement. "I look forward to practicing." Martin looked around at the unconscious rebels, then back at the spear in his hands. "Though I have to ask, what exactly did we just unlock? Because this feels like more than just some ancient weapon." Anita's expression turned serious. The spear's true power was never about combat. It's about unity, bringing together different strengths, different perspectives, the coming darkness. She hesitated. "It can only be defeated by someone who can bridge worlds, someone like you." "Like us," Martin corrected. He could still feel her presence in his mind, a warm certainty that felt more right than anything in his old life. "So, what's our next move?" "First, we secure these rebels. Then—" She gave him an appraising look that made his pulse quicken. "We continue your training. You have potential, Martin Jones, but you're still far from mastering either the spear or our ways. Will there be more kissing involved in this training?" "That depends entirely on your performance." Martin twirled the spear with newfound confidence, its energy dancing around him like playful lightning. Challenge accepted. In the days following the rebel attack, Martin discovered that being an alien warrior king in training involved considerably more paperwork than he'd expected. The Reliant Council chambers buzzed with activity as advisors debated protocols, traditions, and the proper way to proceed with the remaining 2 days of ceremonial marriage rites. "Let me get this straight," Martin said, studying a holographic document that hovered before him. "Before the next ceremony, I have to memorize 300 years of Reliant dynasty history." Anita, who had barely left his side since their binding, leaned over his shoulder. The familiar warmth of her presence sent a pleasant shiver down his spine. "Only the important parts. The rest is optional." "And how many parts are important?" 299 years worth. Martin groaned, letting his head fall back. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Immensely." Her fingers traced the nape of his neck, ostensibly adjusting his ceremonial collar. though not as much as I enjoyed watching you interrogate the rebel leader. That had been interesting. Martin had approached the interrogation like debugging a particularly nasty piece of code, identifying patterns, testing responses, and finally finding the breakthrough that revealed the rebels' true motivation. They weren't just angry about a human taking the throne, they were terrified of the coming darkness that the ancient texts prophesied. They really believe we're all doomed, Martin mused, that this darkness will consume everything. And what do you believe? Anita's question was soft, but he could feel its weight through their bond. Martin stood, the spear materializing in his hand, a trick he'd learned after the binding. I believe in examining the evidence. The rebels mentioned something about ancient star maps, coordinates hidden in the temple's foundations. The forbidden archives. Anita's eyes widened. But they've been sealed for centuries. Then it's time for an upgrade. Martin grinned. Want to help me hack an ancient alien database? Hours later, they stood in a chamber deep beneath the temple, surrounded by crystalline data cores that pulsed with stored information. Martin had connected his understanding of coding with the spear's energy, creating an interface between the ancient technology and his modern knowledge. There, he pointed to a holographic display. The darkness isn't metaphorical. It's a quantum anomaly consuming entire solar systems. And according to these calculations, it's heading straight for both our worlds, Anita finished. She gripped his hand. How long? A year, maybe less. Martin squeezed back. But now we know what we're fighting, and we're not alone. Their eyes met, and that now familiar electricity crackled between them. The spear hummed, responding to their combined emotions. Speaking of not being alone, Anita said, her voice taking on a playful edge that he'd come to love. We still have 2 more ceremonies to complete. Trying to make an honest man out of me? Trying to make you mine. The possessiveness in her tone made his heart race. The next months passed in a blur of training, ceremonies, and increasingly passionate moments stolen between royal duties. Martin's transformation from awkward programmer to confident leader surprised everyone, except perhaps Anita, who had sensed his potential from the start. He approached ruling like he had coding, break down big problems into smaller ones, test solutions, iterate and improve. His unconventional methods often clashed with tradition, but they worked. The spear's power grew stronger as their bond deepened, and with it came new abilities neither of them had expected. You're thinking too loud again, Anita murmured one night, 6 months into their reign. They lay in their chambers, the bioluminescent crystals casting a soft glow over her violet skin. Sorry. Martin traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Just processing today's council meeting. The quantum shields we designed should buy us time when the darkness arrives, but she silenced him with a kiss that still made his head spin. We have hours until dawn. Stop being a king for a moment and just be my husband. Those words still gave him a thrill. The awkward programmer who once spent his evenings debugging code was now married to the most extraordinary woman in 2 worlds. And somehow, impossibly, she loved him as much as he loved her. Their life fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for training. Anita had turned him into a warrior who could hold his own against the best of her people. Afternoons were for governing, where Martin's technical expertise merged with Reliant wisdom to create solutions no one had thought possible. Evenings were theirs alone. On the anniversary of his arrival, they decided to celebrate privately in the sacred chamber where it all began. Martin had planned everything perfectly. The traditional foods, he'd finally learned to appreciate Reliant cuisine, the ceremonial wine, the memory crystals capturing their favorite moments from the past year. I have something to tell you, Anita said as they finished their meal. Her golden eyes sparkled with an emotion he couldn't quite read through their bond. If it's about the training dummy I accidentally vaporized yesterday, I can explain I'm pregnant. The words hit him like a power surge. Joy exploded through him, so intense it made the spear pulse with brilliant light. We're going to be parents. She smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. I can feel it strong, like its father, and beautiful, like its mother. Martin pulled her close, his heart threatening to burst. Everything was perfect, which was exactly when the universe decided to remind him that nothing perfect lasts forever. The sensation hit without warning, a violent pulling sensation, like being logged out of reality. The last thing he saw was Anita's face, transforming from joy to horror as he faded from her world. No! Then he was standing in his Seattle apartment, a burrito at his feet, exactly where he'd been a year ago. Or had it been a year? His phone showed the same date, the same time. Outside, the same delivery guy was just leaving his building. No, no, no! Martin spun around, checking every corner of his apartment. The spear was gone. The ceremonial clothes were gone. But the memories remained, burning in his mind with crystal clarity. Anita, their bond, their child. He could still feel them like phantom limbs. The spear's energy echoed in his veins, but just out of reach. Worse, through whatever remained of their connection, he could sense Anita's panic, her desperate search for him. The next few days were torture. He called in sick to work, unable to face the idea of coding when his entire world had been ripped away. Strange things began happening around his apartment. Objects moved on their own. His reflexes were still enhanced. He caught a falling cup without looking, moving with the grace Anita had taught him. Then came the dreams. In his dreams, Anita stood before him, her violet skin glowing with an ethereal light. Her hand rested on her barely visible pregnancy, and her eyes held both love and determination. "The spear," she said, her voice echoing across dimensions. "It's calling to you. Find the way back." Martin woke with tears on his face and a plan forming in his mind. If he could be pulled back once, he could find his way back again. He just needed to understand the mechanism. First, he went to see his parents. How could he leave this world without saying goodbye? "Mom, Dad," he said over Sunday dinner, watching them with new eyes. His mother was putting extra portions on his plate as always, and his father was pretending to be more interested in the baseball game than the conversation. "I need to tell you something important." "You've met someone," his mother exclaimed, dropping her fork. "Actually, yes." Martin smiled, thinking of Anita. "She's not from around here." "Oh, is she European?" His mother looked excited. "A bit further than that." Martin took a deep breath. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy, but I need you to listen." And he told them everything. About the burrito and the temple, about Anita and the spear, about becoming a warrior king and falling in love, about his child growing in another dimension. His parents sat in stunned silence. "I know it sounds impossible," he finished, "but it's true, and I have to find my way back to them." His father muted the TV. "Son, are you feeling all right? Maybe work stress." Martin stood up and, channeling the training Anita had given him, executed a perfect backflip followed by a series of martial arts moves that no programmer should know. The lights in the house flickered in response to his residual energy. His mother dropped her glass. It should have shattered, but Martin caught it mid-air with reflexes that defied human capability. "Oh my," his mother whispered. "I'm still me," Martin said gently. "Just more. And I'm going to be a father. Your grandchild is out there in another world. I have to go back." His father cleared his throat, eyes suspiciously wet. How can we help?" The next week was a blur of preparation. His parents helped him settle his affairs, create cover stories. His mother cried and hugged him repeatedly, making him promise to find a way to visit if possible. His father, in typical fashion, helped by researching quantum physics theories and buying him survival gear he probably wouldn't need. Meanwhile, Martin analyzed everything about the moment of his first transport. The burrito, which he'd bought again for testing, the exact spot he'd been standing, the time of day. He meditated, reaching for that connection he could still feel with Anita and the spear. Then, one night, he felt it. A vibration in reality itself, like a tuning fork being struck. Through his dreams, Anita had been working from her end, using the spear to thin the barriers between worlds. "It's time," he told his parents on their final night together. "I can feel the window opening." His mother hugged him fiercely. "My beautiful boy, I always knew you were meant for something special." She pressed a package into his hands. Wedding photos, from both your Earth life and after, so your child can know where they came from. His father gripped his shoulder. "Give that grandkid a baseball, will you? Start them early." Martin hugged them both, memorizing their faces, their scent, the feeling of home. "I love you, and thank you for believing me." "Just be happy," his mother said through tears. "And if you can, let us know somehow that you made it." The next morning, Martin stood in his apartment one last time. He'd chosen the exact spot where he'd disappeared a year ago, or a moment ago, depending on the dimension. The burrito sat at his feet. He had a theory about the protein content somehow catalyzing the dimensional transfer, but that was just the programmer in him trying to debug reality. He closed his eyes, reaching for that fading connection. In his mind, he could see Anita in the sacred chamber, her belly now swollen with their child, the spear glowing in her hands as she performed the ancient rituals. "Come on," he whispered. "Find me." The air began to vibrate. Objects around his apartment started floating. His phone buzzed with messages, probably his parents, watching their instruments detect quantum anomalies. He'd promised to text them if he made it back, through a method he and Anita had theorized might work. The pulling sensation started, stronger than before. This time, instead of fighting it, he leaned in. He thought of Anita, of their child, of the life they'd built. The programmer who'd once been content with his quiet life now reached across dimensions for the family he'd never known he needed. Reality twisted. When he opened his eyes, he was in the sacred chamber. Anita stood before him pregnant, the spear pulsing with welcome. Their eyes met, and a long time of separation vanished in an instant. "You're late," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Traffic between dimensions was terrible. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. The spear hummed between them, their bond snapping back into place like a power source reconnecting. "Don't ever do that again," Anita whispered against his neck. "I thought, when you vanished." "Never." He placed his hand on her stomach, feeling their child kick in response. "I found my way back. I'll always find my way back." The spear's energy surged, and suddenly Martin understood. The prophecy wasn't just about fighting the darkness. It was about building bridges between worlds, between peoples, between hearts. The power wasn't in the spear itself, but in the connections it created. They would face the darkness together, not just as warriors or rulers, but as family. And somewhere back on Earth, his parents' phones buzzed with an impossible text message. "Made it. Baby says hi. Love you." Anita pulled back slightly, studying his face. "You're different. Stronger." "Had to be." He grinned. "Can't have our kid thinking their dad's just some programmer who got lucky with a magic spear." "No," she agreed, her golden eyes sparkling. "They'll know their father is the man who crossed dimensions to be with them, the man who learned to be a warrior, a king." She kissed him softly. "And a hero." Hero might be stretching it. But he stood taller, feeling the weight of the spear in his hand, the love of his wife in his heart, and the future of two worlds on his shoulders. Though I did bring back a burrito, for science. Anita laughed, the sound echoing through the sacred chamber like music. Welcome home, Martin Jones. And as he held his wife, felt his child kick, and sensed the spear's power flowing through them all, Martin knew he was exactly where he belonged. Not bad for a guy who just wanted lunch. The end. And somewhere in Seattle, a burrito shop gained a mysterious reputation for changing lives, though no one could quite explain why. A note from Between Worlds. They say the best stories find us when we least expect them, maybe during a lunch break or while waiting for a delivery, or just when we think we've got life figured out. As I penned Martin and Anita's tale, I couldn't help but wonder how many dimensional doorways we pass by every day, too busy checking our phones to notice. Perhaps there's a little bit of Martin in all of us, that part that knows we're capable of more than our daily routine suggests. That part that secretly hopes a magical spear, or job offer, or chance encounter, or unexpected adventure might suddenly appear and prove we're meant for something extraordinary. Until then, I suggest keeping your lunch breaks open. You never know when a burrito might change your life. And if you happen to spot someone with violet skin shopping for Earth souvenirs, well, maybe give them recommendations for good Mexican restaurants. I hear they're quite popular across dimensions these days. Your fellow traveler between worlds. P.S. No burritos were harmed in the making of this story, though several did mysteriously disappear during the writing process.